Well, my last question on this relates to the extraordinary demonstration on the 15th of February 2003, in which vast numbers of people, including two of my three children, walked through the streets of London protesting about the Iraq War, and it was said to be one of the largest demonstrations of recent times. What account did you take of this strength of public opinion, and how did it inform the Prime Minister's preparation for what was going to be this very important parliamentary debate?
Well, in one very specific way, I think the day before the march, I think I'm right, that we were in Scotland. I can't remember that precisely, but the march was getting huge publicity in the build-up. It was clearly going to be an enormous event. And you've got to remember, this is a democracy. The Prime Minister was intending to stand for re-election. He knew that this was a deeply unpopular policy with an awful lot of people, and not just unpopular like some of the other issues that were unpopular, tuition fees or whatever it might have been. This was deep. I always have a rule of thumb that if somebody goes on a march, there's probably 10 others who thought about it. So there's a lot of people who were opposed, and I think what it definitely there was a political consideration. That was a big protest, and he was he thought about that a lot, and he was seized of its significance. But ultimately, I think it just made him think more deeply about the issues. And the day before, I think I'll check the chronology of this, but he did a speech. We met some Iraqi exiles at a hotel in Scotland who'd got in touch with me actually and said, because they sensed the UN thing going wrong, and they just came and said, look, please, he's got to see this through. He's got to see this through. We've got family back there. We know what Iraq is like. You've got all these people on the march, no doubt well-meaning, but they just do not understand the reality of this regime. Please. And I actually took some of them to see the Prime Minister. And he then made a speech where I think the line that was taken out by the media, he made what he called the moral case for war. And because people were talking about the moral case, those on the march, the moral case for inaction. And the Prime Minister really just set out that there is a different view to take here. And ultimately, he didn't. He always used this word. He said, "I don't disrespect those who've come to a different conclusion." But he's elected as the Prime Minister, and I saw the seriousness with which he took the decision. I saw how much it weighed upon him, but equally I saw somebody who fundamentally, really deeply believed that unless the world confronted Saddam Hussein at that time, ultimately, sadly, in that way, because the diplomatic route failed, then there would be a bigger day of reckoning later on. And I think he still believes that now.
And was this moral case one that you were then able, in the short time that remained before the debate, you were able to promulgate in some way through your own efforts?
Well, he made a speech, and the speech got considerable public attention. And then up to at this time, the other thing I'd say at this time is that in terms of the really big moments, I mean, like, yes, we all drafted and we all chipped in and we all had thoughts and so forth, but when it came, for example, to the speech in Parliament, that was very much the Prime Minister's hand. And yes, people would feed in thoughts and so forth, but and that's why I always find it. Look, I like him. I understand why people reached a different position. You had members of I can remember the day after the Monday after the march. There were several people within the room who had members of the family who'd gone on the march. I think a majority. So people knew from within their own households how divisive and how difficult this issue was. And that's why I say, yes, people can reach a different conclusion, but for heaven's sake, let's do away with all the conspiracy theories that it was about oil, it was about George Bush telling Tony Blair what to do. Somebody who has been elected Prime Minister, wants to get re-elected, does not do something as difficult and controversial unless they really, really, really believe that they should be doing it.
And you yourself had no doubts about the moral case?
I supported him right the way through. I won't pretend I didn't have doubts about all sorts of things throughout that process. Of course you do. And one of the doubts is whether he would survive. I remember myself and Sally Morgan actually saying to her at one point, look, are you sure are you so sure about this that you're going to put your entire premiership, your entire reputation, the lot on the line in the way he seemed to be? And I think I recorded it in the diary. He said, look, Saddam's been a threat for far too long, the world has stood aside for far too long. Sometimes you've just got to do the right thing regardless of what people around you may be saying. And he believed that. I respect him for the way that he did that, and I supported him the whole way through, with doubts along the way. Of course I had doubts. And sometimes did you think that the Americans were being impossibly difficult to deal with on this or that? Of course you did. But that doesn't explain the British... the British government, in my view, has to stand up for its own policies and its own ways. And I think it's wrong for people just to come along and say, oh, it was all the Americans' fault and the rest of it. And I think Britain as a country should feel incredibly proud of the role that we played in taking one of the most brutal, barbarous regimes in history. And now you've got, a few weeks down the line, elections which look like they're going to go pretty well.
I'm going to call a short 10-minute break, I think, to give us all a breather. Yeah. And then we'll come back for about a final half hour, if that's okay.
What have we got to do? What's to go?
Some tidying up. And Sir Roderick, I think, has got a question set to do with government process and whatever.
And we're doing the aftermath?
Yeah. And that should finish it.
Okay. Thank you.